These are local governments at the county level saying, no, we're not going to abide.
Our deputies, our sheriffs are not going to enforce these laws. These legislators, they don't actually have any power.
In Virginia, recent gun regulations have created a new brand of outlaw.
We're here today to send a clear and collective message to any would-be tyrants that would attempt to disarm us. We will not comply.
And now, a national scare is raising the stakes.
You've seen gun sales just skyrocket. Everybody's buying guns. If you go to the gun store, you're like, where'd all the guns go?
When gun rights got attached to conservatism, the boogeyman became liberalism and Democrats.
As the fight for more reform continues on.
People tell me, Laura, you want to take my guns? No, I want to regulate who has access to firearms. And if you're at risk of harming yourself or others, yeah, I want to dispossess you of that firearm.
Tensions are reaching a boiling point.
At some point, people will push back, and they'll push back with violence. My viewpoint is militia should be public, it should be out there, it shouldn't be a bunch of guys sneaking around and hiding out. It should be out there in the community. So to do that, what a lot of people have done is done a muster, which is basically a call up of the militia and say, hey, we're forming the militia. And this is a historic term that people have used for a long time.
The backlash to recently passed gun regulations is growing. And in some counties, residents are rallying in a show of force.
Really what's happening is everybody's getting together at these county rallies, and it'll transform into something, it'll morph into maybe a larger cohesive unit amongst districts or whatever.
I started shooting a rifle when I was 9 or 10. This is my AR-15. But yeah, I've been shooting for most of my life.
Do you expect a lot of women here today?
No.
I would trust going into a gunfight right next to my wife. I've seen her shoot. She probably shoots better than me, to be honest.
Probably.
Some of the recent restrictions passed were so-called red flag laws, which allow guns to be denied to those who are deemed a risk to themselves or others by court order, and limiting firearms purchases to 1 gun per month.
If we have the numbers, we can back up the statement that we will not be disarmed.
Thanks for coming. How you doing?
You're not coming to take our guns. You're just not going to do it. That's the attitude that most of us have.
Kurt Feigl is one of the organizers of the muster. He's originally from California and says he moved to Virginia in part because of its support for gun rights.
I've been shooting since I was 12. My uncle taught me to shoot on a .22 rifle up in the mountains of California, and then when I turned 21, I had a handgun and I bought a rifle, but I didn't get the opportunity. There's not a Second Amendment culture like there is here.
Kurt recently helped form a militia in Bedford County, Virginia, and is here to help neighboring Campbell County form its own.
Well, again, welcome, Patriots, to the Campbell County, Virginia Militia Muster. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to be here. Some of you are still not sure about what this is all about. What's a militia? Why should I be in one? The Second Amendment of the Constitution says a well-regulated militia, being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. The right to self-defense, the right to put food on your table, and the right and duty to fight tyranny. These are natural rights. They don't come from the Constitution of the United States. They come from God. We're here today to send a clear and collective message to any would-be tyrants that would attempt to disarm us. We will not comply. Across this nation, anti-gun laws are being passed. On and on the march towards tyranny goes. Whatever form this militia takes in the coming months, it will be what we the people make it. It will be what you make it.
In 2019, the Southern Poverty Law Center, a civil rights advocacy group, identified 181 armed militias across 46 states in the U.S.
Not everybody's a bad person because they own a gun. You got good people and got bad people. Support the Second Amendment. And If militia's for a good cause, I support that.
Gun reform advocates like Lori Haas say recent victories at the legislature followed years of defeat, even in the wake of mass shootings in the state.
After several seasons of pleading with legislators, listen to us, do something about this epidemic, and to have legislators look us in the eye and say, that's the acceptable price we pay for our freedom to own a firearm. I can't think of anything more repugnant.
That comment that this is the price of freedom, what was that driven by?
You know, almost a brainwashing campaign by the gun lobby. Any law is a bad law. Every law is going to take your gun. You know, they only want to take your gun, take your gun, take your gun. If I've had more people tell me, Laura, you want to take my guns, I just like, no, I want to regulate who has access to firearms. And if you're at risk of harming yourself or others, yeah, I want to temporarily, you know, dispossess you of that firearm. But you can have it back. We believe in second chances.
Between July and September 2020, at least 36 Virginians were either temporarily or permanently prohibited from having access to firearms under the recently passed red flag law.
What is it that the NRA has messaged that gets people so emotionally attached to the idea of being armed?
Fear-mongering, there's always the next boogeyman. In the 1930s, they were scared of the Germans, even before the rise of the Nazis and Hitler. But the NRA fed off that. And after World War II, when the Cold War happened, they fed off the fears of communism. They lived off that up through the 1960s. And then there was the next boogeyman, then you talk about terrorism. When gun rights got attached to conservatism, the boogeyman became liberalism and Democrats. Now, whenever Democrats are in power, they are associated with taking away your guns.
While the new Democrat-led state House did pass reforms, some of the most controversial, like bans on semi-automatic weapons and high-capacity magazines, were shelved. Still, gun rights activists say they are bracing for those laws, which they say are tyrannical, to be reintroduced.
What does tyranny mean?
I have natural, God-given, and constitutional rights. And so if you want to pass a law that tries to take one of those away from me, in my mind, that's tyranny. No, I don't feel like we're in communist China territory where these things are happening.
Yeah.
But hey, just 7 months ago, we were all not wearing masks and weren't hiding in our houses and weren't being dictated to. And now look, everyone's just going, okay.
The communist government in China rounding up 2 million ethnic Muslims, putting them into camps. That's tyranny.
It's absolutely tyranny. The Uyghurs you're talking about, those people have no means of defense. If the state comes in and says, you're doing this, what are you supposed to do?
So you think it's possible then that we could see the same fate as them because we don't have the arms to defend ourselves?
I would say yes, and the reason I would say yes is, look, there are numerous accounts throughout humanity's history where entire people groups were wiped out.
Do you think that America is on the path to tyranny?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably accurate. If we keep going down the path we're going down in Virginia, if assault weapons are banned, if magazine bans happen, that's tyrannical. And our state motto is Sic Semper Tyrannis, thus always to tyrants, which loosely translated would be death to tyrants.
And it is, in fact, the very definition of insurrectionism. You know, I don't like the law, so I'm going to ignore it, and I'm going to use my gun to intimidate you and, you know, make sure I'm not going to ignore it. And that's not a democracy. We live in a democracy. We live under the rule of law, and we use our vote.
I think they talk about it in the abstract. It's kind of bootstrapped into conservative politics altogether. So I don't think the NRA is leading the charge on that. They're just taking whatever messaging is happening from conservatism and latching it onto their own platform in order to keep those followers. In terms of whether what's going on in Richmond is tyranny, the Founding Fathers would say no. You have democratically elected officials voting through law, through a process, and they still have the avenue of voting those officials out. They have the avenue of the free press. They have the avenue of the courts. None of those have been denied to them. And until all three of those are denied to them, under the Founding Fathers' definition, there is no tyranny there.
We are headed to the Board of Supervisor meeting for Campbell County because it is on the agenda for tonight for a motion for the Board of Supervisors to officially recognize the militia muster that we did on Saturday.
Chad, who asked that his last name be withheld, grew up in Maryland, which has some of the strongest gun control regulations in the country. He's a member of the Bedford Militia and says he's hoping Campbell County will set a precedent in the push to disobey new gun laws.
You know, the Second Amendment is, while yet maybe not the most important amendment, it is the most important amendment to being able to defend all of our other rights. And so if I give up that right, then there's nothing that I can do to defend my other rights.
Whereas the Constitutions of the United States and the Commonwealth of Virginia recognize pre-existing God-given natural right to self-defense as belonging to individuals and to communities made up of individuals, which no human institution may lawfully abrogate or infringe.
All right, all in favor of Matt's motion?
Can we roll call vote, please?
Okay, we'll start now with Susan.
No.
Steve?
Yes.
Kenny?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you.
It's definitely a historic moment in Virginia. I mean, the militia has not been recognized by a governing body in this state for a very long time, I don't think. So it's pretty awesome. I believe it gives them some legal standing now. Even the local government here has recognized the militia and recognized their ability to defend their Second Amendment rights.
Therefore, the right of the people to keep and bear arms again shall not.
How significant is the formation of these militias?
I mean, I think it's significant in the sense that it shows how polarized our politics have come. If they're doing it on open lands now, that's a big deal. The idea of militias mustering from the founding era was always under government authority. In a way, part of the NRA's messaging. Like, you know, they've really built upon the idea that the Second Amendment protects the right of an unorganized militia, that by you having a gun in your home, you are fulfilling the prophecy of the Founding Fathers in the Second Amendment, and that by you having that gun, you're ready to stand up against enemies, foreign and domestic.
For some, this takes the form of being armed at all times. But there are limits for gun owners in Virginia. Firearms equipped with silencers or suppressors, or guns with a certain magazine capacity, cannot be carried openly.
One thing that I never thought I would be doing is walking into an ice cream shop with a guy open carrying. This is normal here?
It's more normal than probably just about anywhere else. I mean, even in Virginia, you have a better chance of seeing it than you would in, say, Northern Virginia. I do get a few people occasionally that'll, you know, kind of look at you weird or...
What do people say?
Most of the time, it's somebody will come up like, hey, what kind of gun is that? One of the advantages to open carrying versus carrying concealed is that, you know, I try to be a nice, polite person, and, you know, I want people to see, like, you know, not everyone who's carrying a gun is openly is like some aggressive, you know, bully. Like, you know, I don't really treat it as like a pass or whatever to just act however I want. You know, I want people to see, you know, to have positive interactions with somebody that they know is carrying a gun.
You're sort of making a statement that I'm not a threat.
Yep.
I can understand you wanting to do this. You want to exercise your freedom to do this in a state that allows for open carry. What do you need to do it, though?
I think for me it comes down to why carry at all. I never know when there's going to be a threat. You don't get that opportunity. It can literally happen anywhere at any time. You know, some person who's upset about whatever could be down here in the park today and target people. And I want to be able to protect myself, protect my wife, protect the people that I'm with. And, you know, even protect random strangers who maybe didn't feel the need to carry. Now that I've established why I want to carry, now it comes down to like, all right, why am I open carrying versus concealed carrying? There's no added benefit that I see from carrying concealed. You know, pulling my shirt down over my gun has not made my gun safer. In fact, it actually adds more steps that I have to go through to get to my gun, more things that my hands are doing around my gun. I feel like it's actually safer for me to open carry than it is to concealed carry.
An analysis by the National Bureau of Economic Research found through 2014, right to carry concealed handgun laws raised states' overall violent crime rates by as much as 15% 10 years after the adoption of the legislation.
You know, I understand that there are people who enjoy hunting. I understand there are people who enjoy target shooting. I understand that there are people who enjoy sporting for sporting's sake. You know, I'm a sports fan. I don't understand people who think that a firearm is going to save their life in some circumstance or some situation. The element of surprise is always on the perpetrator's side. You know, I remember reading a story about 4 law enforcement officers in a coffee shop. They are the most trained with shot, with accuracy, with all of the skill set you need to respond in a nanosecond. And a gunman walked into this coffee shop and shot all 4 of them.
The prevalence of guns doesn't necessarily make a society safer. A 2014 statistical analysis published in the American College of Physicians Journal found access to firearms in the home increased the risk for violent death. But in times of crisis, people often act on instinct.
Gun sales are soaring across the Delaware Valley during the pandemic.
In a Tuesday morning decision, Governor Wolf determined that firearm retailers could stay open as essential businesses as long as they operate by appointment only. This is not a line for eggs or even toilet paper. The business only allowed a small number of customers inside at a time.
You know, as people get desperate, you know, were people even going to be able to get groceries on a weekly basis? It drove people to also consider, okay, what happens if food does become really scarce? How am I going to protect the food that I have? And, you know, if other people have guns and they want to take your food and they have guns, they're going to get it if you don't.
There is an interesting shift happening right now in regards to guns. I don't know if it's enough to shift the conversation about it, but I have noticed that left, center, and right are all buying guns right now. Left, center, and right are all buying ammunition. It's a significant number of people who've purchased a gun for the first time. Background checks are through the roof. You know, you can't get, in some places, some cities, there are no guns. You just can't buy them.
Since March 2020, gun sales have surged. In October, it's estimated that required background checks increased 60% compared to the same month the year before.
Sun kind of says it all.
For some gun rights activists, headlines of civil unrest and government-led restrictions reinforce the belief the Second Amendment should be guarded.
Well, I have been very fortunate to never have lost anyone to violence. If I had, I wouldn't be asking to take people's rights away.
Can you have sympathy? Do you have sympathy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I couldn't even imagine. I have 2 teenage boys. I couldn't even imagine. I would literally lose my mind if something had happened to either one of them. But I still am not going to comply. I'm not going to give any of mine up. The life we have can be very tragic at times, and it's sad. But restricting my liberties isn't going to change that. There are people in our society who are evil, and the only way to stop them is with violence.
What's the plan?
Well, who's not been to this range before? Probably any of you. Okay, so everybody. That's fine. Basically, it's a small little range we put in the woods. We've got one really short one and one longer one with some steel targets at 100 yards. We're going to go over malfunctions. We're going to go over shooting stance. We're going to go over functions of the rifle and the different things. Of course, the AK you'll have to adjust, but that's no big deal. See?
We're following members of the Bedford Militia into the woods here to do some of their regular rifle training.
And if you alternate brown and white, we won't have any confusion about whose is whose. Treat all guns as they're loaded. There is no such thing as an accidental discharge. You'll hear this on the media all the time. There's an accidental discharge. No,
It was your negligence that led to that discharge. Never point your gun at anything you don't want to destroy. That one's pretty simple, right? But that rule, these first two rules, when they're broken, that leads to bad things. We see it all the time in the news. If you follow the 4 firearm safety rules, you almost never have a negligent discharge. Guns don't go off on their own.
Okay, go ahead and engage.
Threat!
As they cycle through the training, Kurt, the instructor, is saying, threat, threat.
Stop it!
Who that threat is or what that threat is, I'm not quite sure.
Contact front!
If I were to call up any of my friends and say, hey, I spent Sunday afternoon with a bunch of militiamen in the woods in Virginia, they'd freak out. Like, why do you think so many Americans have this sort of visceral response to the word militia? Because that does scare people.
It does, yeah. It doesn't around here, but I understand what you're saying. Hearing gunshots in this area is totally normal. I mean, you hear it all the time. Why do I think that the militia word is so demonized? Well, Hollywood. Every show that I watch, it's always a right-wing, racist, insert the thing there. So it says, hey, these guys are bad. If I had to use this firearm, I know I could use it safely. I don't want anybody innocent that's not part of, when I say threat, getting hurt.
You know, you use the word threat. What are these sort of inevitable situations that you want these men and women to be prepared for?
You know, I don't know. We're trying to be broad about it because we just don't know. Ultimately, we believe that we carry firearms to defend ourselves. If I call the police, it's going to be minutes, maybe even an hour, till they show up for whatever it is. So I've always believed it's my job to defend myself.
You mentioned that there are sometimes beginners that you're helping to train. I guess, are you seeing an increase in the number of people who don't really have a lot of firearms training who are wanting to become part of the militia?
People are really well equipped, let's put it that way. So they have a lot of the right gear. They've got the rifle and the magazines and the ammo. And, you know, clearly it's something that they've had for a while, been interested in for a while. Kind of like me, I started years and years ago. My first rifle I bought when I was in California, my first AR-15, but I never had anywhere to shoot it. So I didn't start learning how to use it really until I got here.
Contact front! Move! Moving!
A Pew Research poll found that nearly 70% of gun owners say protection is a major reason they own a firearm. Still, the majority of Americans support stricter gun laws.
This is not the city or the Commonwealth or the country I want to live in. If gun owners are in fact law-abiding, if we had a background check required on all sales or all transfers, the person attempting to get possession of that firearm would have to jump through some hurdles. Is regulation going to stop all gun violence? No, we know that. Drunken driving laws don't stop all people from abusing alcohol and getting behind the wheel. But we've got to start and we've got to try.
Despite all of the laws that have passed in Virginia, the gun safety advocates are not done. What does resistance mean on your side?
The anti-gun people, what you call safety advocates, they're not anti-gun. They want people with guns to come to my house to take my guns. And at some point, people will push back, and they'll push back with violence.
And is it feds coming, banging down the doors and taking your arms with force?
I don't know. I mean, you have lots of non-compliance up in New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, but you don't see them going door to door.
Then, is there really a need for a militia? What does the militia do other than perhaps, make a strong statement?
Well, I think sometimes a strong statement's all you need.
Do you see any room for gun legislation, gun regulations?
No. I have no interest in compromising with the opposition that would like to restrict my Second Amendment freedom. It's a right.
So you see that right as being absolute?
Absolute.
So a curb on the number of weapons that you can buy in any given month is an infringement?
Yes.
Registration?
It's an infringement.
So no room at all?
No room at all.
Hey, thanks for checking out CBSN Originals on YouTube. If you want to watch more documentaries, download the free CBS News app on your phone, tablet, smart TV, or any streaming device. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel by clicking down here. Thanks for watching.